Hey y'all, it's Queen J. We're back with episode 4. Wow, episode 4 of Let's Get Uncomfortable. And this topic is going to be a little heavy. We're going to dig a little deep. I know we was digging deep in the last episode talking about shifting our perspectives and shifting, our perspectives, but also, shedding the past version of ourselves. Well, to dig a little bit deeper, this is going to be real sensitive content coming your way. But first and foremost, let me do a trigger warning now, because we're going to be talking about the strength of vulnerability. And we're going to be talking about how I discovered this strength. And we're specifically going to touch on the term called representation, or what that means within the Black community. As far as, I'm not sure if I feel like I'm not the only person that has heard this sentence, but when you walk out the house, you represent who? You represent me. So don't be acting a fool and don't act like you ain't got no sense. Those are just the little warnings that I got. I don't know if everybody else got them, but this is what I want to touch on. So, first thing, reason why I said trigger warning is because this is going to touch on the time when I was at my lowest and when I first had discovered suicidal ideation. And for those of you who do not know what suicidal ideation is, it actually is the thought of wanting to commit suicide, but also can be thoughts or thinking of actions of self-harm, of that nature. And it is a sensitive topic, and it can be very triggering. So, trigger warning. And if at any point you get uncomfortable with this and it starts to bring up some feelings that you're not ready to just dig into just yet, take a breather. Step away. Do not digest this all in one sitting. It's okay. Trust me, I understand. Well, first, before we get into the topics, we're going to do a little mindfulness, but I wanted to do the trigger warning before I forgot. Pause, breathe, relax. It is now time to open our mind to exploring new ways of healing within this lifetime. It is now time to absorb new meaning of the word healing. All right, y'all. I hope y'all really felt that. I hope that allowed y'all to get centered, align y'all chakras or what have you. But we're going to get into today's topic. Like I said, today's topic is going to touch on some really heavy content. And again, if you need to step away, I totally understand. So first things first, we're talking about the strength of vulnerability and what that means and how I discovered that at an early age. So for me, when I was in middle school, I had already endured a lot of pain, a lot of negativity, a lot of numbness. And at this point in my life, I had really just started to open up and talk to people about what was going on within my home, what was going on within my body. But one day I made a vow to myself that because it seemed like I was telling the wrong people and that nothing was coming out of my speaking up and my saying what I needed to say, I chose to stay silent. But there was always those moments where I was like, you know what, fuck staying silent. I'm just not gonna do that. I just can't, because I knew it wasn't right? Well, essentially what I ended up doing was, after an incident on a school bus where I was physically assaulted, I was pretty much forced to deal with my emotions. And at this time, I was a wild card. I couldn't handle my emotions. I couldn't process them in the way that was healthy. So what I did was I lashed out. I went after the person that had attacked me well after the fact, but it wasn't just because of that. It was a buildup of emotions. It was a buildup of incidences. It was a buildup of incidents that caused me to just snap, essentially. And mind you, I was in middle school, so essentially what happened, I lunged at the person that had attacked me on the school bus. I did. And we both got sent to some type of room with these individuals. Long story short, we were discussing the nature of, okay, why did you stab her? Why did this happen? And how do you feel about that? Do you accept this person's apology? Yada, yada, yada. And I'm sitting there and I'm just like, yeah, I do. But I really wasn't thinking. But I really wasn't thinking about the incident. It wasn't me thinking about, okay, I just got injured. My eye hurt. It wasn't that. It was literally me thinking okay, I don't matter. And I think, like I said, I think it came from a lot of different emotions, a lot of different things that were occurring at the same time. So, but that was just the icing on the cake. That was just kind of well, damn. I literally didn't do anything to cause this, but be myself, so I don't matter. That's kind of where my mind went. That was how that mindset was at the time. So I'm sitting there and we're discussing and we're talking about things, and I just start talking. I just started really opening up outside of, the pencil incident. Essentially what happened was I was stabbed in the right eye with a pencil on the bus. And it was, like I said, it was the icing on the cake. I was sitting there, minding my own business, and it just happened. But essentially, we were sitting in this room with these two white women who were the guidance counselors of the school. And essentially, they were trying to get to the bottom of me not talking because I just was not opening up. I was just yeah. I was struggling with being vulnerable in that time. Looking back, I can see that. But essentially, I don't know, something came over me and I just started venting. I started talking about how no one cared, and I'm used to pain, and I kind of just started really outpouring all the things that I had made myself keep hidden. And you can imagine I was super vulnerable, super raw. And these women, I started to touch on, the suicide, the thoughts of suicide, the attempts, and, how I didn't like myself. I just started to touch on those things, and they're stopping me and they're saying, well, we don't think that you would actually commit suicide. We think that this is just a cry for attention. And it shifted something in me. For one, there were a lot of things that were wrong with this whole scenario. First of all, I don't even know what room we were in. For two, why is it two white women telling a little black girl, basically, I don't believe your story, and so I don't believe you. I don't believe the pain that you're talking about right now. You're so young. You can't have possibly experienced that. It's essentially what they were saying. So when I was thinking and saying the things that I was saying, it kind of shut me up a little bit. Because then after they had said that sentence, or they had said these things, they were like, but here's a grief journal because we can tell that you're going through a lot. So yeah, it was kind of like cleanup. Well, we don't want her to go home and actually do it, so let's give her a grief journal so that she can be vulnerable, right? Well, at that time, I understood then that it was power in vulnerability. As I got older, I realized that there was even more power in sharing. But it's all about who you're trying to make that connection with. And here comes the representation piece of this episode. Essentially, what I mean by representation and representing is showing up for yourself. Like, growing up, I always got that lecture of, if you go out this house, you represent me. If you go out here, you represent me, and da 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 da. And I never liked that. I never liked it. I always would rebuttal, and I would always be like, but aren't I really representing myself? Because you're not with me, and like, it's not like everybody in the world knows you. So I don't represent you. I represent myself. Of course, my mother did not like that. She did not like that. She did not like that, because for her, it was about representing in terms of being respectful, in terms of being polite, in terms of being raised properly, right? So it wasn't necessarily about me. It was about her, and having the rest of the daggone community, or the people that I interacted with, know that she was a good mom. Know that she didn't raise no hooligan, pretty much. But I then shifted my mindset. As I got older, I shifted my mindset, and I began to realize that representation has absolutely nothing to do with our parents. That representation has everything to do with us. It has everything to do with representing for yourself. And what I mean by representing for yourself, I mean show up for yourself. Like, in those vulnerable moments, that is the first time I ever was vulnerable. I ever opened up to someone that was outside of my family, outside of my close friends. And that had backfired on me when I had said that to those white women and the person who had attacked me. But it didn't steer me away from being vulnerable. Actually, I was more drawn to it, because it was like, one of these days I'm gonna get this shit right. One of these days I'm gonna tell the right person, and I don't know, I'm just gonna feel so much better. I'm not gonna feel like it was a waste of time to say what I needed to say. Right? So when I say represent for yourself, when I say show up for yourself, and the strength of vulnerability and the power that comes from within, it's all about connecting with yourself, and you have to be vulnerable with yourself. You cannot, I have done it. I have tried, believe me, y'all, I have tried every avenue of, no, we not feeling that today. We just gonna be numb. I have lived in that cycle of those lies where I'm like, I'm happy as shit. And you know damn well you ain't happy. I've lived it. And that's why I say it's very important. It's vital for you to represent for yourself. Represent in the ways that you need to be there for yourself. Or the same way that you would want someone else to be there for you, you need to be there for yourself in that way first. And that time frame, and when I did have the grief journal, I was writing in it. They had given me some instructions to write like positive things about me, and at that time I was struggling so hard I couldn't come up with 3 things that I liked about myself. I really couldn't. It was so difficult. It was so challenging. But over time, I found that the technique wasn't the best for me. Like, that was a good plan of attack for my depression and for my suicidal ideation. That was a good plan of attack. However, I needed more power within it. I needed more control within it. So basically, what I ended up doing was taking my grief journal, and I was like, I don't like writing this. I don't like the way that I'm showing up for myself. This is like, I didn't like it. I was in middle school and I really did not agree with the ways in which that these white women had placed this upon me. So maybe this was me being rebellious. Maybe this was my act of, okay, I'm not going to do it this way. I'm going to do it this way instead, or in a different pathway. But essentially what I ended up doing was I was writing in this grief journal, but I wasn't just writing 5 things a day and then leaving it at that. No, I was writing, I feel stupid when I get a math question wrong. Or I was just slowly coming to terms with feelings and slowly understanding what went where. And looking back on it now, I realized I was processing shit. I was processing that me coming up with 3 things to say that's nice about myself every day. That was me building my confidence, but it was kind of hard when I tried to ignore the negative. I still had to address the negative in some way. And not where I was like, oh yeah, I totally agree with that negative statement. No, it was more so like, I am feeling this way because of this, but I am not that. Separating my identity from the emotion was a big thing for me. Even in middle school, even in high school, even now. Because it's allowed me to be more open with myself. Because if I sit here and tell myself all day long I'm sad, I'm going to attach my identity to that. Maybe that's just me, but that's what I mean by when you have to represent for yourself. When I would be out in public and I would be with my friends and my mom's words would ring in my ears, I would be thinking, man, I represent me. I am my own individual. I can't always represent her. Because the thing is, if I always represented you or someone else, then I would never represent me. And I would never be true to myself. I would live my life for you continuously. Which is exactly what I was doing as a kid. Even when I got older. It took a while for people to point it out to me or for me to realize it myself, because I was so accustomed to doing things in terms of for the other individual. You can't go here because I wouldn't go there. You can't eat this because I wouldn't eat this. You can't wear this because I don't want you to wear that. Or it was always this sense of control. And I'm not even just going to say with my mom, because the other person involved played a big part of it as well. But there were times where I felt like I just couldn't be. I was constantly nitpicked on every little thing that I did. And it didn't matter whether or not I lived up to that expectation. It didn't matter if I exceeded that expectation. There was always something negative hidden within. The positive could never just be that. It could never just be positive. And I think I grew accustomed to, well, the other shoe's gonna drop. And once I shifted that mindset into thinking, into knowing and believing that that's not always the case, I have to see it from a different perspective, I was able to be more still and be more conscious of what I'm saying, what I'm doing, how I'm reacting, if I even need to react. So when we talk about being really triggered and we talk about dealing with suicidal ideation and thinking about, oh, I'm helpless. My voice doesn't matter. I don't matter. Those, whatever your suicidal ideation is, you have to look at it as a way of understanding. And this is a hard thing to do. It is a hard thing to do. It's not easy. But you have to kind of look at it from a lens of, okay, I thought this in the past. Okay, I felt this negative pressure in the past. You have to acknowledge it. Don't embrace that. Acknowledge it. Acknowledge that it exists, because the further you continue to ignore that you felt that way about yourself, if you ever have, the easier it is for you to hold on to those negative feelings rather than release it and let go. Because you're going to keep saying those negative things. Man, I'll give you a prime example. There's so much power within being vulnerable that if you're telling someone, if you go up to a stranger and you say, you just pay them a compliment, you're very kind to them. The emotions that can come up from that one compliment, I don't care if you said, I like your shoelaces. The emotions that can come up from that one compliment have no idea the impact that we can make on someone by being kind. So imagine the impact that you're making on yourself when you're saying, bitch, why did you do that? That's not very nice. It's not very nice. I know we say some of these things, we all have our own little things that we say to ourselves. But if you don't want someone showing up for you in that way, you don't want someone being mean to you, you don't want someone disrespecting you or dismissing what it is that you have to say, or dismissing your thoughts, then represent for yourself, show up for yourself, and try not to do the same thing for yourself. Excuse me, I need some water. Try not to do the same thing for yourself. Try to do the opposite. I learned a lot from that weird experience with those white women. I really did, but it was weird because of the way that they tried to quote unquote help me. It didn't feel like help. That's not help. You don't just tell a kid that, especially when they're being vulnerable like that. But in the state of vulnerability, and because I had told the wrong people or had interacted with the wrong energy at the time, I started to develop this mindset of, if I'm vulnerable, then it's going to be always used against me. When that's not always the case. That's not necessarily true. It's just you got to be mindful who you're being vulnerable to. I know I said that before, but be mindful who you're being vulnerable to. If it's someone that you trust for a really long time, then yeah, you can be vulnerable with them. But the thing is, you have to allow yourself to be vulnerable with yourself in order to be vulnerable with someone else. If you keep walking around and saying that you're fine when you know good and well that you're not, when your mental is imbalanced as hell, and you going through some cycles, and you just like, I'm not going to talk to nobody about it, I'm going to just shut the world out, or I'm going to pretend. I've been there. That's why I said this topic is so sensitive, because I heard something today. I found it on Instagram. And I'm going to be real honest. I wasn't even going to post an episode this week, but something told me, just post this one. Just do this one. This was going to hit. The Instagram that I saw, it said, okay, I'm just going to say it. Healing is not, I can't even, it hit me deep. Healing is not loving or becoming the best version of yourself. I'm going to say that again. Healing is not becoming the best version of yourself. It is not. Healing is loving the worst version of yourself, is allowing the worst version of yourself to be loved. And what that means is oftentimes we have to show up for ourselves in times of vulnerability. We have to allow our softness to exist. We have to allow the feminine to show. We have to, as much as our masculine likes to take over and dominate, we have to allow our softness to exist. We have to allow ourselves to sit with our feelings, sit with our processes of emotions and thoughts. We have to allow acceptance. We have to allow acceptance. We have to allow the vulnerableness. We have to allow that openness within ourselves, because that is what healing is. And healing is so difficult because you know how easy it is to sit here and be like, oh, I ain't got nothing to work on. I'm perfect. Or I may have flaws, but I don't feel like dealing with them. So easy. It's very easy. It's so easy that I did it for 5 years. I did it for 5 years. And it's incredibly easy to slip into that mindset of, okay, being numb is a lot easier than feeling. But it's also a lot harder to get out of. Because when you're numb, that's actually when you're feeling everything, but you're deciding not to address it. I know. I just discovered that. I just disclosed the big ass secret of numbness in healing. You're feeling everything all at once, and it's so easy to just say, I'm numb. It's so easy to turn your back on what you're feeling because someone at some point in your life made you feel as if though your feelings were never valid, as if though your voice was never valid, as if you were never valid. And it's sad. Because the thing is, that couldn't be further from the truth. But for those of us with suicidal ideation, for those of us with the tendencies to slip into depression, for those of us with the tendency to have, especially those of us that struggle with mental health illness, mental health disorders, for those of us that struggle with PTSD, like myself, it can be so hard to try to look at something from a different lens because you're so accustomed to the negative. And it goes back to shifting your perspective, because that's really all healing is shifting your perspective while being willing to unlearn the toxic shit that you was taught, especially for yourself. So when I say show up for yourself, show up for yourself. Sit with your younger self, sit with your current self, sit with your future self and talk. If you need to talk, or write it out. These are just some of the ways that you can show up for yourself. You can represent for yourself by showing up for yourself in a vulnerable state. Because as much as we hate to admit it, like I said, healing is not becoming the best version of yourself. It's allowing the worst version of yourself to be loved. It's allowing that love in. It's accepting that worst part of you exists. It's accepting the fact that your past is your past, but it is still a part of you. I'm going to say that again. It's accepting the fact that your past may be your past, but it does not have to affect everything that you do every day. It doesn't have to have control over you. You're able to break out of the mold. You're able to grow. But in order to grow, you got to at least accept that there is a part of you that's struggling. That's what healing is. Let's get uncomfortable. Let's get uncomfortable. Why y'all think I chose that name? Let's get uncomfortable, because baby, healing is uncomfortable. Being alone, being vulnerable with yourself, it can feel icky. It can feel like, why I gotta do that? I don't want to do that. I just, listen, you know what? Y'all give me a big old party and I'll be good. How about that? Can that be healing? Not really. Not really, because are you really partying, or are you deflecting from the feelings that you're experiencing? Ooh. Like I said, y'all, we get real on this podcast. But with that being said, the last things that I want to reiterate again is that the strength of vulnerability for me was the power of the words that I spoke, was the power of the friendships that I made through my actions and my voice. When I finally got the courage to speak out and say, I'm not voiceless. I was never voiceless, but I may have felt that way. It's hard, but it's so worth it. And that's me speaking from experience, because this is challenging. The strength that comes from being vulnerable is truly how you make those meaningful connections. And anyone that trusts their instinct and trusts their gut and their intuition, you know the difference between someone using you for your strength or someone using you for your story. You know the difference. You know the difference between someone being genuine and someone using you. And a lot of the times, us good people, us good-hearted people want the opposite to be true, but I'm learning that sometimes the word toxic is exactly how it describes that individual. Sometimes the word fits the person, and you can't take that label off of them for as long as you try. You can't, because sometimes the word matches the individual, and that is powerful in itself, because you have to understand that if that word fits them, then that's who they are. That's who they are. And you have to be okay with who they are. That's straight up it. That's just it. I wish there was more like, but there was a but coming, or there was a yet. Nah. That's exactly how it is. So when you have that strength of being vulnerable, or you find that you want to, use your power of vulnerability, then do so. But also know that the true meaning of the strength of vulnerability allows you to make those meaningful connections, allows you to discern between what's rightfully meant for you and what's not meant for you, what's genuine and what's fake. It allows you to really discern between that. It really does, because I used to try to not be vulnerable. I used to say, no, we're not talking about that. We're not going there. Just because I was so scared to even bring up some of the things that I had experienced at a young age. But now that I have crossed the threshold of healing, where I am able to embrace the realities of the situations that I've experienced, which is they happened. I didn't deserve it, but they happened. I did not deserve that. And a lot of the times I find myself throughout the day saying, nope, we didn't deserve it. If a flashback comes up, nope, we didn't deserve that. If I start to hear, have my auditory flashbacks, nope, I'm not dealing with that. I'm not going to allow that to affect my present. That is my past. I'm going to embrace that. I'm going to hold on to the younger me, and I'm going to allow her to use her voice. We're going to have our moments of sadness. We're going to have our moments of clarity. We're going to have our moments of doubt. But as long as I understand, and as long as we collectively understand that there is power that comes from within via our vulnerability. That's all there is to it. You show up for yourself. You represent for yourself. Forget the representation for everyone else. You show up for yourself. You straight. So long as I say, okay, I did one thing different each day. That's showing up for yourself. One thing different. You don't got to do all the extra. You don't got to do that. Just one thing different. Represent for yourself by tapping into your vulnerability when you're ready. I ain't saying you got to rush to do this, but you'll know when it's right. You'll know. Your energy will tell you if you believe in that. I do. So that's why I say your energy will tell you. Because my energy tells me everything I need to know. My gut tells me everything I need to know. Anxiety will tell me differently, or try to. But that's when you talk to anxiety like that is the person that you just don't even want to be bothered with. And you say, listen, I didn't come to you and ask you for this. So don't be coming to me and giving me this. I don't need it. I don't want to think about that. I know that that's not the situation. I know that's not the case. We cool. We good. Carry on. We are A-okay. Talking to your anxiety helps. Talking to your depression helps. Being vulnerable with your depression, being vulnerable with your suicidal ideation, being vulnerable with your anger, your feelings, it helps. Because at least you're acknowledging it and you're recognizing that it does exist within you. Because if you don't, oh honey, those feelings don't keep bubbling up. So in order to actually work through this part of healing, you have to show up for yourself. You have to represent for yourself, represent for your emotions, represent for your thoughts, represent for you and no one else. I'm going to leave this off. I'm going to finish this off or close out with a question. And it may be hard, but I really want y'all to think on this. What does the strength of vulnerability mean to you? How do you utilize that strength throughout your daily life? And if you can really think of those examples, you can write them down. Or if you can't think of any, think of the ways that you would want to be loved by whoever. Whether it's yourself, whether it's someone that you want to be loved by. Think of the ways that you would want someone to love you, even at your worst. That's the best way I could put it. Whether you want to take yourself on a date, whether you want to dedicate 15 minutes to yourself of meditation, whether it be you want to drink more water every day, whether you want to get back in the gym. Think of those ways. Write them down. But that's how you start with understanding the power of representing for yourself, showing up for yourself. This has been Queen J with Let's Get Uncomfortable. Thank you for seeing and hearing me.